nice gentleman is Abhishek. I mean, he should have gone to movie rather than coming to radiology. But he is a nice man. I met him in Rajiv Gandhi and he was very supportive and he agreed that he will be helping us. And I was planning to bring him also here for some programs. So hopefully we can club together and go for this intervention. Sir, Aslam, sir.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, 3টা বেজে গেছে স্যার স্টার্ট করে দেই স্যার
অবশ্যই জন্য তো আমি অন করলাম
ওকে সো
I'm muting everyone.
Sir, this is Abhishek, sir. He is from Rajiv Gandhi. He will be our today guest faculty. Abhishek Bansal is an intervention radiologist and Professor Hai, our president of the organization, Abhishek. Okay, sir.
Very good afternoon, sir. Part of this amazing program, sir. And thank you so much for having me here today, sir.
So, sir, I'm starting. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome you all to our virtual academic program. As you know, that in the COVID era, where everybody was trying to do social distancing, we are trying to keep ourselves connected by some academic initiative. So at a part of this, we started this session, how I should treat my patient following evidence-based medicine. And as a part of this program, we have already finished a long series of breast cancer and we have started with lung cancer. And today is our second program on lung cancer. And definitely we start with the investigation. We started with the molecular imaging. Now we are molecular pathology. Now we are going to today discuss about the advanced imaging. So today our faculty is a known face, Dr. Sharmin Akhtar Rupa. I think most of the oncologists in our country now know her because she is a friend radiologist who understand what is our need. So thanks Rupa for being with us and she will be talking on role of advanced imaging in management of lung cancer. And today we have a wonderful person as our overseas guest faculty, Dr. Abhishek Bansal. He is an interventional radiologist in Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute and Research Center. As you all know, Oncology Club have a very good rapport with Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute where we are having a big collaboration. Some of our colleagues already get trained there and we have a regular visitor from there in our physical program and also in virtual program. Overall, we respect Rajiv Gandhi as a very respected teaching institute, academic institute, and we're grateful to them that they are supporting to us. So as we know that we are always very grateful to our president and our patron, Professor M.A. Hai, sir, who remain present in our program just to inspire us. Sir, your presence is our inspiration. Like a tradition, may I request you to formally start the program. Professor M.A. Hai.
Thank you, Kamal. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My heartfelt thanks to all of you for joining our webinar. And also my special thanks to Dr. Abhishek Bansal and Dr. Rupa for enlightening us this afternoon with your expertise. Without any delay, I want to start it immediately. Let's start.
So thank you, sir. So our program will be for 90 minutes. Our presentation will be 15 to 20 minutes. Then there will be some comments by the foreign expert. And then we will have a half an hour question answer session. And then we will have a case today. Dr. Arman Raza Chaudhary will present the case. And then we have a quiz, online quiz, very attractive because our juniors are very eager to get the quiz. And then we will have a rapid fire session. Then we will have a vote of thanks. And then we will wrap up. And for stratification, we have a faculty. Faculty is the presenter, foreign faculty, and local. All the participants after assistant professor will be treated as faculty. All PG student and postgraduate doctors below the rank of assistant professor will be treated as participants. Normally, we will expect the participant will ask the question and faculty will try to respond, but everybody is welcome in the discussion because we treat it as an interactive session. So with these few words, I want to finish and I want to request our today's faculty, Dr. Sharmin Akhtar Rupa, to start her presentation. Rupa, now the screen is yours, please.
রূপা শোনা যাচ্ছে নাকি? সাউন্ড হচ্ছে না, মিউট করা আছে নাকি দেখো তো।
Sir, unmute করা
কামাল,
আছে ma'am কে।
কামাল দেখো।
স্যার রূপা তুমি একটা আনমিউট করে নাও। ও আনমিউট করা আছে স্যার, সে স্লাইড ঠিক করছে স্যার।
কথা বলছিল শোনা যাচ্ছে নাকি?
রূপা তোমাকে আমি শুনতে পাচ্ছি না। মেবি তোমার হেডফোনটা একটু চেক করে নাও।
স্যার হেডফোন খুলে ফেলছি স্যার এখন।
ফাইন ফাইন, এখন নাও।
আচ্ছা। So today my topic about the role of advanced imaging in management of lung cancer. So as sir know, you most of you know, I'm Dr. Sharmin Akhtar Rupa, working as associate professor, Popular Medical College. So our today's learning objective is the CT anatomy of chest, especially the mediastinum, and a glimpse of TNM staging, mainly the radiological evaluation, identification of nodal station, which is very important for the radio-oncologist, radiation oncologist, and imaging modality of choice in pre-treatment staging, follow-up, and surveillance of lung carcinoma. We all know in case of CT scan, we usually use to see the two window. We say one pulmonary or lung window, another is mediastinal window. You can see this is a pulmonary window. We can see the pulmonary vessel here, pulmonary, that is the lung parenchymal very well here. And this is the mediastinal window where you can see the mediastinal structure, that is the great vessels very well. This mediastinal window is very important because in this mediastinal window, we see whether there is presence of mediastinal nodes, or if there is any carcinoma, whether there is mediastinal invasion. Usually to evaluate this mediastinal lymph node and mediastinal invasion, we prefer IV contrast enhanced mediastinal window. There you can see, this is the great vessels here, and you can see here the non-enhancing lymph nodes against the enhancing vessel. You can see the lymph nodes here against the vessel. So contrast enhancing mediastinal window is very important to evaluate this structure. This is another image. You can see the lung carcinoma invades the mediastinum. There is, you cannot separate the carcinoma from the mediastinal structure. So another important issue for the mediastinal window. So now take a quick glance of the mediastinal CT anatomy of mediastinal structure because for every aspect of lung carcinoma, whether there is a mediastinal invasion, to identify the station, lymph node station, you must know the mediastinal anatomy, CT mediastinal anatomy very well. So this is a take mediastinum quite upper level. You can see the superior vena cava, and this is brachiocephalic artery, left common carotid artery, and left subclavian artery. And this is a air-filled structure, it is trachea. Just below this level, that is just below the level of arch of aorta, you can see the superior vena cava. This is ascending aorta, and part of arch of aorta, this is descending aorta. This thin rim air-filled structure is trachea, and just behind it, thick walled air-filled structure, this is esophagus. And this is right lung, and this is left lung. This is spine and spinal cord. And just below that level, you can see the main pulmonary trunk. This is the right pulmonary artery. This is the left pulmonary artery. This is the below the level of carina. You can see the right principal bronchus, the left principal bronchus. This area is also important to identify the hilar nodes, precarinal, subcarinal nodes, like these structures. And this is descending aorta. This is ascending aorta. Now the TNM staging, 8th TNM primary tumor characteristics. TX tumor in sputum or bronchial washing, but not be assessed in imaging. So this is not our interest today. Our interest is T1, T2, T3, and T4. In T1 staging, you can see here, tumor equal or less than 3 centimeter and surrounded by lung or visceral pleura, not involving the main bronchus. You can see there is a tumor which is completely surrounded by the lung parenchyma. So this is a T1 tumor. T1 tumor again subdivided into T1A, M1, that is minimally invasive, T1A less than 1 centimeter, T1B and T1C according to the size. Next, T2. In T2, you can see the tumor size more than 3 to equal or less than 5 centimeter, or involvement of main bronchus without carina, regardless of distance from the carina, or invasion of visceral pleura, or atelectasis or post-obstructive pneumonitis extending to hilum. Then it is again subdivided into T2A and T2B according to size. You can see here there is a tumor almost 3 to 4 centimeter in size, and 3 to 4 centimeters. So this is a T2A tumor, and you can see here this is a tumor of more than 4 centimeter in size, and it involves the visceral pleura. So this is also a T2B tumor, and it involves the visceral pleura. Now the T3 tumor. T3 tumor is more than 5 to equal or less than 7 centimeter in greatest dimension, or tumor of any size that involves chest wall, pericardium, phrenic nerve, or satellite nodules in the same lobe. This is very important, that is satellite nodules in the same lobe. When the satellite nodule in the same lobe, it is T3. When the satellite nodules in the ipsilateral lung or in the ipsilateral lung but in different lobe, it is T4, or in the contralateral lung it is metastasis. So this is a T3 tumor. You can see a quite large tumor, and it invades the chest wall and also erosion of the ribs. In the next image, you can see there is a erosion of the left, fourth and fifth ribs. So this is a T3 tumor. Now the T4 tumor, it is more than 7 centimeter in greatest dimension, or any tumor with invasion of mediastinum, diaphragm, heart, great vessel, recurrent laryngeal nerve, carina, trachea, esophagus, spine, or separate tumor nodules in different lobe of ipsilateral lung. In T3, it is a same lobe, and in T4, it is a ipsilateral lung but in different lobe. So here you can see the large bronchogenic carcinoma. We cannot separate the carcinoma from the mediastinum. So this is a T4 tumor with the invasion of the mediastinum. You can see in M1A, tumor in contralateral lung. So any tumor satellite nodule in the contralateral lung, it is a M1A tumor. Now before going to N staging, we must know the regional lymph node classification. American Thoracic Society mapping the thoracic lymph nodes into 14 stations. They give the lymph nodes station into the coronal images. Our duty, my duty, is to familiar to you with this coronal schematic representation into a axial CT scan. The radiation oncologist must know this. So I will go step by step, first giving this, identifying these regional lymph nodes into the diagrammatic image, then into the CT scan. So first, supraclavicular nodes, that is station 1. Station 1 is the supraclavicular nodes. This is low cervical, supraclavicular or sternal notch nodes. Anything above the margin, above the level of clavicle, this is supraclavicular node. Then station 2. Station 2 is the upper paratracheal lymph nodes. Upper paratracheal lymph nodes from the lower margin of the clavicle to the, this is a diagrammatic representation. This is a trachea. This is a right innominate vein, left innominate vein, superior vena cava. This is arch of aorta. This is azygos vein. This is a left pulmonary artery, and this right and left principal bronchus. This is esophagus and right lung, left lung. So right station 2 is the upper paratracheal lymph node. Upper paratracheal lymph node from the lower margin of the clavicle to the upper margin of the arch of aorta. So anything between this line is the upper paratracheal lymph node on either side of the trachea. Now how we different the right, again the right paratracheal lymph node again subcategorized into right and left. How we differentiate this right and left paratracheal lymph node? If we draw a line along the left lateral margin of the trachea, then anything on this right side of left lateral margin of trachea is the right paratracheal, and on the left is the left paratracheal. So any lymph node in front of the trachea, it is also the right paratracheal lymph node. Then station 4 is the lower paratracheal lymph node. It is from the just below the upper margin of the arch of aorta to the level of the main bronchus. Again, it is categorized into right and left station 4. So by drawing a line along the left lateral margin of the trachea. Then come to the 3 station. Station 3 station we cannot appreciate in the coronal image. It is best appreciated in the axial image. Anything in front of the prevascular anterior to the vessel, it is 3A, and anterior to the vertebra, that is posterior to the esophagus, it is 3B. So this is the diagram. You can see the line drawn along the left paratracheal margin. Anything above and right to is the right paratracheal and left is left paratracheal. So now in the axial CT images, you can see this is a high density structure. This is thyroid gland. So thyroid gland, you can see a non-enhancing rounded structure with central necrosis here. This is a right supraclavicular lymph node. So this is station 1. In the next image, you can see this is trachea, and this is superior vena cava, and this is left carotid and subclavian carotid vessel. So anything on the right side and anterior to the trachea is the upper paratracheal lymph node. If we draw a line here, anything left to this is the left paratracheal lymph node. Anterior to the vessel is the prevascular lymph node. And next station, you can see the arch of aorta. So just below the upper margin of arch of aorta, anything in front and right to the trachea is the right paratracheal lymph node. And if we draw a line here, left to is the left paratracheal lymph node. So you can see level 1, level 2, level 3A, and level 4, right and left, level 2, right and left. Next, subaortic lymph node, para-aortic lymph node, and subcarinal, that is station 5, 6, and 7. Station 7 is very easy. It is subcarinal area. It is subcarinal lymph node. And station 5, that is below the level of aorta and above the level of pulmonary artery. This is subcarinal lymph node. Any lymph node anterior and lateral to the ascending aorta and arch of aorta is the para-aortic or level 6 lymph node. So in this image, you can see this is just below the level of arch of aorta. So lymph node here is the level 5 lymph node. I'm sorry, there is no prevascular, that is paravascular lymph node here. But you can see this is a carina. This is just below the level of carina. You can also see lymph node here. So this is a subcarinal lymph node. That is station 7 lymph node. Now next image, paraesophageal lymph node. This is on the, it again, right and left. If you draw a line in midline of the esophagus on the right, this is a right paraesophageal. On the left, this is a left paraesophageal. This is station 8. 9 along the level of pulmonary ligament on each lung. Then the station 10 to 14. Station 10 to 14 is called extramediastinal lymph node. That is outside the mediastinum. It starts from the hilum to the intrapulmonary lymph node. Actually, these all lymph nodes from station 10 to station 14 are considered as N1 node. So you can see here in this axial images, this is superior vena cava, this is carina, and this is the level of the hilum. You can see the non-enhancing area. This is station 10 lymph node. So take a quick look about what is N1. N1 is ipsilateral, peribronchial, and or hilar nodes or intrapulmonary nodes. That's I say extramediastinal lymph nodes. That's station 10 to station 14 are N1 nodes. N2, ipsilateral mediastinal and or subcarinal nodes are N2. N3, contralateral mediastinal or hilar or ipsilateral or contralateral scalene or supraclavian. That is ipsilateral or contralateral scalene or supraclavicular lymph nodes are N3. So it is quite different, a little bit different for the right lung and left lung. As I say, in case of left lung, the marking point is along the left lateral margin of the trachea. So first we see the right lung. In the right lung, if there is a carcinoma in the right lung, if station 10 to station 14, all are N1 nodes. All the ipsilateral mediastinal lymph nodes, that is along the left lateral margin of the trachea to subcarinal nodes and paraesophageal nodes, the pulmonary ligament, all are N2. Beyond this, all are N3. Even the ipsilateral supraclavicular nodes, all are N3 lymph nodes. In case of left lung, in all the extrapulmonary, that is station 10 to station 14, all are mediastinal, all are N1 lymph nodes. Ipsilateral mediastinal lymph nodes, all the subcarinal, left paraesophageal, and the pulmonary ligament, all are N2 lymph nodes. Even the rest of the contralateral, hilar, and mediastinal lymph node, even the ipsilateral supraclavicular node, all are N3 lymph node. Now, this is an example. You can see a large mass here and with the mediastinal invasion. Now, in the pulmonary lung window, you can see there is a hilar lymph nodes here. This is N1. You can see there is a subcarinal, precarinal lymph nodes here. This is N2. Again, I go further. This is prevascular lymph node, and this is a this is precarinal lymph node. You can see the subaortic lymph nodes. If I go in the previous image, you can see the subaortic and the paraortic lymph nodes all are N3 lymph nodes. So again, if I see the subaortic lymph nodes in case of right lung carcinoma, this is already N3 tumor. So this is upper right paratracheal. In case of right lung carcinoma, right paratracheal lymph node is, sorry, left paratracheal lymph node is N3 lymph node. So again, left paratracheal lymph node is N3 lymph node, and also the supraclavicular ipsilateral, this is a N3 lymph node. So again, just recapitulation, right lung carcinoma with hilar, that is extramediastinal lymph node, left paratracheal, supraclavicular lymph node, and subaortic lymph node in our case. So it is a N3 lymph node. Now the imaging modality of choice in pre-treatment staging of lung carcinoma. Contrast enhanced CT and upper abdomen is recommended for patients who are candidates for radical treatment. PET scan. PET is indicated in patient with no clinical abnormalities and no sign of metastatic spread on CT who are candidates for treatment with curative intent. It is useful for evaluating metastatic spread except that occurring in the brain. PET is not required in patient with ground glass opacities or clinical stage 1A tumor with no other abnormality on chest CT. MR imaging has very specific indication in lung cancer staging, and MR brain is indicated in patient with stage 3 and stage 4 tumor, also indicated in patient with brain metastasis identified on CT scan. Apical tumor or tumor invading the chest wall and mediastinum, and MR imaging of adrenal glands may help sometime to exclude adrenal metastasis in case of indeterminate adrenal lesion on PET CT. Actually, we prefer CT scan, but when there is an indeterminate lesion, we prefer MR scan. So this is a Pancoast tumor. Here we can see the invasion of the mediastinum and the brachial plexus very well with the help of MR imaging. Now the most important thing is the surveillance imaging after curative intent. Current NCCN guideline recommendation that CT scan of chest every 6 to 12 months following definitive intent treatment of lung cancer for 2 years, followed by annual low-dose non-contrast CT for patients who remain without evidence of disease, that is low-dose non-contrast CT. No guideline currently recommended the integration of PET into surveillance algorithm in the absence of suspicious CT or clinical finding. The most burning question for the radiation oncologist, that is for the contour of the lung tumor, how we can differentiate the central lung tumor from the post-obstructive lobar collapse. The answer is dynamic contrast CT scan, because by the routine contrast CT scan, we cannot differentiate the lung tumor from the adjacent collapsed lung. What happened in the dynamic contrast scan? Dynamic contrast scan, we take several images after giving bolus injection. So these are the collapsed lung margin. In the collapsed lung margin, crowding of the pulmonary vessels are here. So they enhances earlier than the bronchial artery, which supply the lung tumor. As the bronchial artery is smaller than the pulmonary vessel, and pulmonary vessel is crowded here, that's why collapsed lung is enhanced earlier than the lung tumor, and we can easily appreciate this lung tumor, margin of the lung tumor from the collapsed lung margin. You can see here the lung tumor that is less vascular than the adjacent collapsed lung. You can see here the lung tumor. So collapsed lung is appreciably enhanced by tumor enhancement is slow and minimal. The difference is most marked from 40 seconds to 2 minutes after scanning begins. This phenomena is probably related to the marked increase in blood flow per unit area of collapsed lung due to crowding of relatively large pulmonary arteries compared to tumor blood supply through the small bronchial arteries. Thank you. I think I cover as you required, sir.
So thank you, Rupa. Yes, you have covered what I have asked for. Maybe it sounds a bit very basic, very primitive, but I requested her because what we believe that we pretend like understanding CT scan, majority of our colleagues, clinician, but in majority places, we may not understand the CT scan, especially chest CT. So when we totally depend on the paper, so we read the report, we hardly look at the film because for us, total film is one thing. So we cannot understand what is carina, what is node, what is vessel, what is a positive node. So that's why I asked Rupa that, can you please touch upon the very basic things that is required for us to understand the basic, how to identify all the structures. So that was my objective, and I am very happy that Rupa, you have really covered what I have asked for. So now I request, before going to the question and answer, Abhishek, would you like to make few comments?
Thank you so much, sir. And as you rightly said, Sir Dr. Rupa ma'am has covered all aspects of it, and she's covered it very thoroughly. So I really don't think I can add on to it anything. She's covered beautifully the NCCN guidelines, touched base with the TNM staging. That is very much important. The only thing that I can maybe add on from an interventional point of view is that this was one of the questions that was also being asked. PET-CT also helps in differentiating collapse from the active part of the tumor. And this is where we can actually hit that lesion for the biopsy point of view. From a medical oncologist point of view, to get a good tumor tissue for the molecular testing, I think that is where also we take the help of PET-CT, sir.
So as Rupa intentionally didn't touch upon PET-CT, I kept it actually for you because two reasons. Number one, PET-CT is not a very popular thing. In Rajiv Gandhi, we know it is very popular, sometimes more easy than doing a CT scan.
Absolutely.
Yeah, oncologists love to do a PET-CT than a CT scan. And number two, I wanted to request you, because today we are not going to cover much on interventional radiology, but would you mind to add on something just on PET-CT? I mean, what are the areas that you think that PET-CT could be helpful in especially lung cancer, both in diagnostic, follow-up, and also in treatment?
Yeah, thank you, sir. So definitely, sir, PET-CT's got a very big role in terms of lung cancer. Because these days lung cancer is one disease where looking at good survival in terms of years for these patients. And as ma'am rightly pointed out, for all lesions, so even as per NCCN guidelines, for all lesions, NCCN even talks about getting a PET-CT in stage 1A also. But when we know that this is stage 1A lesion peripherally based and CT doesn't show any other problem. So I think beyond stage 1A, stage 1B onwards, PET-CT can be offered to the patients. There's enough data that occult metastases have been found and that have changed the treatment options for the patient totally. So as far as a diagnostic point of view, PET-CT has got a definite role. And even from the treatment point of view, it is able to prognosticate and help you decide how the patient is responding to the treatment. Post a few cycles of even as early as 2 to 3 cycles of chemotherapy, if you're seeing a drop in the SAFU value, you can tell that the patient is responding well to the treatment. And not only that, now we have immunotherapy in lung cancer that is coming up big way. So PET-CT has got a big role to play in that also, because we know that even as per IRACIST, a lot of times we're not able to tell radiologically as per CT whether the patient is going to be a responder or not. And we even have people who have pseudoprogression and other things. So that is where PET-CT comes in handy. It is able to tell you that the drop in SUV is an early marker for tumor response. And as I pointed out already, apart from initial staging, the treatment response assessment, it also helps you target the most active area from a biopsy point of view to get a good sample tissue for the molecular testing. even I've touched base with the NCCN guidelines. So I think it is a way to go ahead with all patients beyond stage 1B. They can be offered PET CT.
So Abhishek, my question, you were telling that in case of immunotherapy, it is something very promising and emerging. Yesterday, we finished our preceptorship where Ullas was one of the faculty, Anjali was another faculty. So Govind was explaining that normal CT scan and normal radiology is not always capable of identifying the response, because maybe with CT scan, we may not understand that immunotherapy is working. So as you were telling, that PET CT can help. Can you put some light on there?
So definitely, once we start on the immunotherapy, just to keep it very basic, we know that immunotherapy acts on by activating the T cells, and a lot of these cells would come around the tumor and cause a lot of inflammation and kill these cells. So if we do an early CT scan, so we might get a false positive in terms of we might see the lesion as increased in size, but in eventuality that is not the real lesion. That's more of an inflammatory response that the body is putting onto it. So this is where the PET CT comes in handy. It is able to tell you that if the SUV value, the standardized uptake value drops down, you know that the patient is responding well, and you can tell definitively that the patient is responding, and you can even differentiate between a pseudo progression and a patient who would actually progress. But again, then radiologically and even nuclear medicine wise, we can't be 100% accurate. It is the medical oncologist and the clinician who has to tell that the patient is doing clinically well, because that is the ultimate criteria. I mean, as per as radiological criteria goes, we can't tell that the patient is pseudo progression unless the patient is really doing well.
Yeah, thanks, Abhishek. Again, I'm coming back to the PET CT. That what about a solitary pulmonary nodule? I mean, sometimes a solitary pulmonary nodule by a radiologist, it is not always very easy to make a comment, even with the contrast enhanced, that whether it is benign or malignant. But again, we are in the area of tuberculosis. So
Absolutely.
how can we, both will be illuminating, you know, we will high SUV. So how can this PET CT, how can we differentiate?
So very pertinent points, sir, especially the Indian, the Southeast Asian continent. We have a lot of tuberculosis patients. So this is one of the fallacies that Western countries don't have, and we have it, that a lot of these patients would have been exposed to tuberculosis also. So PET CT per se, again, we would not be able to really differentiate between a tuberculosis part of it and an oncological part of it. And even we get a lot of lymph nodes on PET CT, which are FDG-avid, but eventually, as per even our experience, when they have been sampled by EBUS, they have turned out to be granulomatous lymph nodes. So again, this is one of the fallacies that in the Southeast Asian subcontinent we would deal with. But again, I think depending on the SUV cutoff values, if you're looking at a SUV value of above 10 or so, we are reasonably confident that, okay, this might be something we're dealing with an oncological lymph node or oncological malignancy. But still, if I'm given a choice of investigating and diagnosing a solitary pulmonary nodule, I will still go with a CCT first, with the dynamic CT contrast. And because the PET CT, the CT scan they would take along with PET is a attenuation correction CT scan, which is a low dose CT scan. So they're not able to give you adequate lung windows, as Dr. Rupa had shown in her first slide, the lung and the mediastinal window. So the lung window is very important. Look at the margins of the lesion, the speculations, the tiny lobulations, that can be only appreciated well on a sharp kernel on a lung window CT scan. So that is where CCT comes in handy. And still CT scan with contrast has got a big role to play in a solitary pulmonary nodule. And nowadays, I'll take you a step forward. We're moving towards lung cancer screening, the low dose CT scan in high risk population. So again, I think it's got a CT's got a big role to play there, because we have dedicated guidelines, the Fletcher Society guidelines, where as per the size of the nodule and the risk factors, we have how to follow up these patients. So CT will continue to play a role in all those patients in solitary pulmonary nodules, especially, sir.
So you touched upon a very interesting topics, that low dose CT screening. Are you practicing?
Yes, sir. So to be honest, to be candid in front of you, so we have got a protocols set, and but again, to implement it on a larger scale, we are having some issues. We're trying to have some awareness programs, and I mean, the program is all set and all ready to go. But I think it is still taking some time to gather steam on the ground reality to be actually starting in our country. Because again, the basic problems of health insurance and other coverage issues come into our country, and not all people are happy to go for a CT screening, sir.
No, but I was trying to understand that how, what is the criteria that you have set for screening with low dose CT?
So
Screening.
again, we kept it high risk people, sir. We have different criteria. The smokers, we divide them under in terms of number of pack years, how they've smoked, any family history, and so those are major risk factors. Any exposure to occupational risk factors for CA lung. So that's how we classify them as high risk, low, intermediate, and high risk group. And then we've given scoring systems for them, and then we're trying to get them onto a screening program and then follow it up. But again, the main problem is that we don't have a centralized system of capturing patients as the Western countries have. So patient might come to me today for a screening program, but he might not turn up for the next due screening program. He might just turn up somewhere else. So that is something I think we need to build upon our central database, and then I think this program can really take forward.
Thank you, Abhishek. I mean, I was intentionally pulling up some information from him, because me and Rupa planned that we will not cover PET-CT intentionally, so that we can ask you to make some comments, and we'll be having some more discussion hopefully on PET-CT. And I raised this issue of this low dose CT screening because initially it was a negative trial, but finally it came out to be a positive NAGM publication, and now it is very popular. But we were scared about the dose of radiation because X-ray chest was not an ideal parameter to do the screening. But when this low dose CT concept came, so we are not taking a big risk, but the high risk group we can really identify. And now we know if we can identify the lung cancer in stage 1, that is T1, T2, N0, we can offer them 95% control rate and near about 70% survival by SBRT or by surgery. So that is the target group that we are dealing. So now the floor is open. I see some of the question in the chat box, but I will appreciate that one after another you can unmute yourself. So first, Riyadh, you have a question. If you want to still ask the question, you can ask.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. My question is already discussed, but I want to ask another question, sir.
Please.
My question is to Rupa madam. Madam, is it necessary to do dynamic contrast enhanced CT in all malignant case, or we only consider it if it is suspicious, if it is collapse, or we?
Thank you. Actually, dynamic CT scan, first, the case I showed you, if there is associated collapse, to differentiate from the collapse from the lung tumor. Another is that.
I could not hear. Is it okay, or it is my line?
Hello, sir. Hello. Can you hear me, sir?
Ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah. And second thing, we use dynamic CT scan that Abhishek says, it PET CT scan, we see the response. Because nowadays the immunotherapy, we in RECIST criteria, we assess the tumor size to see the response. In RECIST criteria, we measure the size. But by the immunotherapy, you cannot measure the that is the size of the tumor. So that's why we do the dynamic scan if we see the enhancement pattern of the tumor. So we compare with the previous scan and the post-response tumor, that is contrast enhancement. That's why that's two cases we use dynamic scan.
Okay, madam. Then, is it judicial to do a CT scan first, then again we do a dynamic CT scan if we have suspicious collapse?
Actually, what we do, first we give the bolus injection. First we take the non-contrast scan. In non-contrast scan, we see that whether there is a associated collapse or not. Then we give the dynamic scan. In dynamic scan, we don't take the all three, that is some centers take 3-phase, some take 4-phase, not the on lung, only the arterial phase we cover the on lung, but the for 120 second, 180 second, that is 240 second, we only cover the tumor, not the whole lung. So the radiation is less.
Thank you, madam.
So I think there was another question from Debraj, if I'm not wrong, because I was disconnected, so my chat box is clean now.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Good afternoon. Madam, I had a question. If CT angiogram has a role in diagnosing CA lung in any way?
I don't heard about it, the CT angiogram any role.
Abhishek, any comment?
I agree with Dr. Rupa ma'am, sir. Per se, CT angiogram doesn't have any role unless we're talking about bronchial artery embolization. But that's a different aspect, but not for diagnosis, sir.
So any more question, anybody? I mean, juniors, you are welcome to ask some question on CT scan. And not only CT scan, MRI imaging, so you can cover MRI and PET also.
Sir, one thing I add that in what you told about that is the for during the lung contour, the problem you face in case of CT scan, the differentiate between the collapsed lung and the lung tumor. So during contouring, we take the help of PET CT also evaluate, differentiate this lung tumor from the collapsed lung. Even the diffusion weighted MRI also differentiate this. But what happened during the contour? You cannot, you have to marginated this lesion very well. So in that cases, that is dynamic CT scan, I think more helpful during contouring.
And I agree with ma'am, sir. MRI has got a big role to play, sir, in differentiating distal collapse from a central lesion.
Yeah,
and
diffusion weighted image.
This is very helpful.
Yeah, what Abhishek and Rupa is trying to tell that for the oncologist, when we are contouring, when it is a central tumor, we know that there is a principal bronchus or any bronchus, it is kept taking up. But when there is a peripheral atelectasis, that is the area we don't know which one, how much to take, how much to leave. Because we are doing a 3-dimensional plan, every millimeter is a value. Because 1 millimeter makes a big 3-dimensional value. So if we can spare 1 millimeter, we save 1 millimeter normal lung read it. On the other way around, if we miss 1 millimeter, we take a big chance of recurrence. So this is a very critical area. And as she said correctly, that PET CT is a very big friend there. With the help of PET CT, we can identify the atelectasis from the tumor. But again, for our juniors, funny thing is that even we have PET CT, the recommendation is you should do your volume on CT, not on PET. Then you edit on PET CT. So gold standard is PET, is CT, not PET. Abhishek was talking so many things about PET CT, then coming back that he will prefer to have a CECT, and then because whatever in lung we are adding on by PET CT or diffusion rated MR, whatever it is, it will be addition on CT scan. Still the gold standard for imaging of lung is the CT scan, if I'm not wrong. So any more question?
If I can add, sir, especially for early small tumors, where the surgeon wants to resect, he would want to have a CECT to look at the mediastinal structure, sir. I mean, that is a prerequisite, sir.
Yeah. So for the surgery and for us also, because when there is a debate, I mean, say PET CT can give us some clue, but sometimes it is non-conclusive. SUV is 2.5 or 3. So it may be, may not be. So, I mean, it is not, PET CT is helpful, but it is not a replacement of FNS biopsy.
Yeah. So yes, sir, it is guideline says that the first imaging modality is the CT scan, not the PET CT. PET CT is the additional.
Yeah, so I mean, some of our colleagues may think that if I had PET CT. Now the question is, say PET CT is nothing but a combination of a CT scan and a PET. So why to do a CT scan? Why not I trust the PET CT, CT component of the PET CT, Abhishek?
So I touched base upon this point, sir. The CT done in a PET CT is not a full normal CT. It is just done to correct the attenuation. So we call it a attenuation correction scan. So PET is basically a functional imaging tool. And to add on to any structural imaging, we need to fuse it with either a CT scan or an MRI scan. That is why we call it a PET CT or a PET MRI. So the CT component of the PET CT is not a full CT scan in terms of we don't have a sharp kernel for the lung background imaging. We can't tell you whether the patient is having a background ILD, which is very important, especially in patients who are being considered for TKI treatments, because we know that that's one of the complications for such patients. So that is something per se, even at a lot of centers, the PET CT is not, the CT component is not being done a contrast CT. So you can't comment onto the mediastinal structures. And as I've already told, as you also pointed out, in the Asian subcontinent, TB is rampant. So again, we stuck whether these patients, whether the lymph nodal station is a part of the disease or a part of the superarid infection. So I think those are the fallacies where we do need to get a CT scan, and we can't really absolutely rely on a PET CT. Though it may sound as a one-stop shop, but again, there's no absolute thing that PET CT will be the way forward. And again, it has to be individualized to a patient. And again, as the oncology, they say it's more like personalized medicine. So it's like, I would say it's more like personalized imaging needs for a patient rather than a general dictum.
Thanks, Abhishek. Let me add with you in more, very simple way to our juniors. Look, PET is a functional imaging, but with PET, we know that where it is illuminating, that is the FDG is taken high. So then when it is illuminating, we need to understand what is the location. So just for that location purpose, this CT is used. So as Abhishek correctly said, like the CT that Rupa is working, giving a report, that is a CT made for total diagnosis. This is only to identify the structure. This is lung, this is liver, this is kidney, this is the bones. So, but this CT is not designed, as Abhishek was telling, to give all the details of a diagnostic CT. So maybe we may lose some tools if we only trust on this CT. So why I am telling this, majority of our colleagues thinks that I don't need a CT scan because I have a PET CT. I have a Rolls Royce, so I need a Toyota. But Toyota have its own value. So diagnostic CT is diagnostic CT. It will never give you the information with a PET CT. Even there is a CT component because the best PET CT machine is not having all the features of a diagnostic CT that we see in an average CT scan machine. So again, as both of them were talking, we should be based on our CECT. That is the gold standard. We should have it in our hand, and then we do a PET CT to add on to know where is the node, where is the atelectasis, or whatever it is the metastasis, it's a solitary nodule, is it benign or malignant, something like that. But nothing is going, this PET CT component of PET CT is never a replacement of a conventional CT. Many of our colleagues make a big mistake because they see a CT image and they see a PET fused image, so they treat it to save few thousand taka or money. They don't go for a CT scan. And I asked for a PET CT, why to go for a CT scan? That is a blunder, and many of them are doing it. So I think that this is a good platform, especially for the junior, to discuss that even you have a PET CT, you should do a CT, because Abhishek and Rupa both of were telling that they can tell us so many wonderful things from a CT scan, which a PET CT cannot tell us. So I see one more question in brain stem lesion on MRI. Sarwat Sultana, please, you ask your question. Sarwat.
Thank you, sir. আমি আসলে একটু প্রথম থেকে মিস করেছিলাম, হসপিটাল থেকে আসতে দেরি হয়েছে। থ্যাংক ইউ ডক্টর রূপা ম্যাডাম এন্ড থ্যাংক ইউ ডক্টর অভিষেক। রিসেন্টলি আমরা একটা পেশেন্ট পেয়েছিলাম। পেশেন্টটা ছিল ব্রেন স্টিমুলেশন এমআরআই তে। বাচ্চাটার বয়স ছিল 6 ইয়ার্স। তো পোর হতে পেশেন্ট এমআরআইও করতে পারেনি। তো আমরা ব্লাইন্ডলি আসলে পেশেন্টের ট্রিটমেন্ট শুরু করেছি, রেডিয়েশন। বাট এই ক্ষেত্রে আমাদের কি কোনো স্কোপ আছে কিনা, আমরা কিভাবে কনফার্ম করতে পারি যে এটা আসলে ম্যালিগন্যান্ট ছিল কিনা?
So her question is, Abhishek, I think it was a 6-year-old kid, brain stem lesion. So, but for the financial constraint, they cannot do MRS. But without that, how can? Rupa, want to take the question first?
Sir, actually, MRI is the choice for brain stimulation. There's no other option. MRI with MRS, as they have to differentiate it from the malignant lesion, that is from the metastasis. So MRI with MRS is the choice.
But if it is an exophytic lesion, MRI is showing there is a lesion. Normally brainstem with exophytic, I don't know. Can we exclude by doing the nature without doing MRS that it is malignant or metastatic, primary malignant or metastatic?
No, sir. Always you cannot differentiate from the metastasis from the malignant. MRS is actually, this is a matter of whether metastasis or not. This is a big that is marking point. So MRS will give you the evidence base. So this is a metastasis and this is a primary tumor.
Abhishek, can PET scan help here?
Sir, again, brain is one of the areas where PET CT again falls flat, and especially with FDG18, though they're trying to work around by C11 methionine, which says that it is better with brain. But again, as Dr. Rupa said, MRI remains the gold standard, sir. And there are a lot of tools with MRI that you can play around, MRS, perfusion imaging, and all those. But again, so we need to realize one thing. Radiologically, we can only suggest a differential diagnosis. We can never give a diagnosis for sure.
Yeah.
And there are times when we are also stuck, whether what really it is. But if I heard it correctly, Dr. Sultana said that the child's age is around 6 years of age. So I guess we can more or less, depending on the morphology, the posterior fossa lesion in a 6-year-old has to fall into a category of something malignant, and I would keep METs on a lower differential list. And so again, depending on the clinical history, we have a lot of differentials of a posterior fossa lesion. So I think I would straight away upfront go for the differential diagnosis. And again, I think the neurosurgical team would be the one who would be able to provide the final answer, sir.
Yes, Sarwat, I have a comment here because it is a 6-year kid. There is 2 issues to consider. Number one, compared to the adult malignancy, pediatric malignancy have a cure rate of 80%. That is a big thing. On the other way around, it is a 6-year kid. When we are handling brain, we should be very cautious. So yes, it is a burning issue that they cannot afford to do the MRS. But again, I will say that to treat a kid of 6 years with radiation to brainstem, I will be very, very cautious because it is an area of the brain which is the most sensitive in the whole brain. So if we are making one small mistake, maybe we are doing harm than doing the good, number one. Number two, another thing is that even except the lymphoma of brainstem, that is very non-exophytic type, it is recommended when there is a debate, stereotactic biopsy, even after all the imaging is recommended, because if we are missing a lymphoma, because brainstem lymphoma is not very uncommon, but if we don't know what is the primary, maybe we make a mistake in our treatment modality, dose and everything. So, well, I am not criticizing. I appreciate what you have done, but if it was me, brainstem 6-year kid, I am scared to treat this type of patient because especially pediatric is a scary area. I am not very comfortable personally. CNS is another scary area. And when it is area like thalamus or pituitary or brainstem, I am really conservative. I mean, I don't know what I am doing. So if it is a frontal lobe, I can take a risk. If it is a GBM, I can take a risk. But when we are talking about, as you was telling, posterior fossa is a curative treatment. So if I am missing something, I am missing the chance of cure. So I will request that we should try our best to find out. But yes, in a country like us, in a center where you are working, unbelievable challenges are there, and salute to you that with this challenge, you are really doing a great job. So any more questions?
Kamal bhai, assalamu alaikum.
Yes, Istu.
I have a question to the faculties.
Yes.
What is SEBU max?
What is SUV?
SEBU max.
Max.
Max. Is it differs from tumor to tumor? And how can we evaluate that there is viable tumor by knowing SUV?
Abhishek, some light on SUV, because is it a, I mean, let me add you something. I learned there is something called SUV, and if it is more than 5, it is malignant. If it is less than 5, it is not malignant. So make a comment on this. Totally.
So you can, as someone who has been into this, I would tell you that we have a lot of memes with the SUV that is not, so normally SUV is standardized uptake value, and it is not a value in isolation. So whenever we give FDG, so FDG is basically radioactive glucose, and you inject it into the blood of the body. So it is always related with the background of FDG that the liver takes. So it is always in relation to the background, what the normal liver would take. So SUV is always balanced according to that. But again, as a dictum, we have also, while I was doing my graduation, post-graduation, we heard this thing. But again, now we have seen enough cases where that SUV, even more than 5, has turned out to be not a malignancy or a neoplastic thing. And SUV per se has got no value. So you can't compare one SUV to another SUV in a different patient within the same tumor. Yes, SUV can be used to follow up a particular patient post-treatment, but in isolation, SUV has got no value at all. The only thing I would say is that it can help you in terms of post-treatment follow-up and monitoring if the patient is responding well or is not showing response. That's about it.
So Abhishek, if you are telling that SUV have no value, so why you do PET-CT? Because you have everything in CT scan and only this illumination is the magic in PET-CT. So when you are interpreting a PET-CT, what is helping you to tell Dr. Kamal, this is a frank malignancy?
So again, sir, what we have seen that many times PET-CT has shown occult metastasis elsewhere. But again, PET-CT is mainly used to look for METs. So even then, on a PET-CT, I'm not really bothered about the SUV value at a different metastatic site. It is more about, you would know as an oncologist yourself, even though we might get a metastatic site, you would want to biopsy that site. You would say that, okay, this is a site, but still let's go ahead and biopsy this to confirm, because again, it makes a hell lot of a difference in terms of how do you want to treat this patient and how the treatment would change. Because suddenly, from a curative point of view, the patient might come into a palliative category. So again, PET-CT has got a role to change the treatment in terms of identifying occult metastatic lesions, especially in peritoneal deposits, which might not be very well picked up on a CT scan. So those are the areas where PET-CT scores over CT scan. But again, then just to focus on SUV value in itself would be something I would want you to be cautious about. We have had burned our fingers where we thought that SUV was this and this has to be this, but it hasn't, trust me, it didn't turn out like that. So SUV is only relevant in a particular patient with a particular disease, and only if you follow up that patient over a period of time. Otherwise, in isolation, so you can't use a SUV value even between 2 patients for a particular disease, because then again, it varies a lot. It also depends on how much FDG you have injected in a patient. So the different centers might not have a same standard protocol in terms of injecting the same amount of millicurie of FDG that you would want to inject.
So Abhishek, thank you very much for focusing it, because many of our colleagues think that PET-CT is a magic. And I can tell in India, Rajiv Gandhi is probably one of the center where most frequently PET-CT is done, because it is one of the cheapest PET-CT probably in private sector in whole India. So I heard from my colleagues that they feel so comfortable because it is only few thousand rupees, just ask for a PET-CT. But as he explained very nicely that only looking at a high SUV is never a conclusion that it is a malignancy. But on the other way around, I can tell, but as a radiologist, Rupa or Abhishek, when they look at a CT scan, they are more confident to see an image and a contrast enhancement or a DW image in MRI, diffusion rated image, and make a more confident comment that, sir, most likely I'm more or less confident it is a malignancy or this node is positive. But only on this magic SUV, as he said, is never a conclusion. Yes, it add on something, and the most important is to find out something very small occurred, which was missed by a traditional CT scan. So due to the illumination, then we put our focus there. Well, let us look into it and what is it? So number one, and very important, he was telling to see the treatment response. So as we all know that in lymphoma, it is a standard protocol to do a PET-CT pre-treatment and post-treatment. During treatment, the response of PET-CT give a information that how the patient will do, even the prognostic. So if you have, let's say, SUV of 10 and on follow-up it becomes to 2, then we can say, yes, the same tumor SUV value has gone down or it becomes 0. That is a good response. But only 6 SUV or cutoff of this magic number 5, because many of us think that anything above 5 is malignancy. It is not true, and especially not in a country like India or Bangladesh, where we have many infection, tuberculosis, sarcoidosis, many other things which can mimic. And another very funny but very interesting thing he was telling, that none of us ever read that how much FDG was injected. So it may be a protocol of a center that how much they're injecting. And another thing, Abhishek, I want to mention that in our region, every center is not having their own cyclotron. So sometimes the FDG is flying from one place to another place. So for example, from Dhaka to 200 kilometers, somebody is taking away. So the FDG is used fresh and which was used few hours later, the total outcome of the maybe the same patient will give a total 2 different SUV. And that, I mean, that will make the fallacy. So where is the FDG made? After how many hours it was used? How many it was injected? There is so many things, and the blood sugar level of the patient. So Dr. Isteswar, I think you got the answer that it is a very important thing. And bottom line is, please, it is not a replacement of tissue biopsy. Till now, a PET-CT is never ever a replacement of tissue biopsy. And space location like brain, location like liver, PET-CT is very treacherous. It cannot give you a real clue. So we had good discussion.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, to Abhishek, sir, my question is, so when we are doing PET scan in a lung patient to see occult metastasis, so we are just looking for the same SUV in another foci as of the tumor. Is it right?
So if let me understand that, say one tumor is there, diagnosed SUV is 8. Then I see a area looking for a 8 SUV occult metastasis or something, even 4 or 5 is also suspicious. Because we know the primary and metastatic always carry the same morphology or something. So in radiology, will it be the same SUV or it may differ?
It may differ, sir, for obvious reasons, because again, it depends on which organ the metastasis we're talking about. Because that normal organ will also have a background of uptake. So as I was telling you, I didn't want to call it by names, but SUV, for jokingly, we also call it as stupid uptake value, because it has got no meaning, trust me. So the main primary may have a SUV of 8, the metastasis may have a SUV of 3 or 4. But as I told you, you will have to, the oncologist will want to biopsy that area, because just on the basis of PET-CT, you cannot change your treatment. And in our continent, we have seen that so many of our patients would have an infectious etiology of it. So obviously it can only hint towards that. Okay, if the primary disease is like this, the metastatic might have a similar SUV, but majority of the times it never is the same SUV that we have seen.
Abhishek, I have a question. What is the minimum by PET-CT? What is the minimum size that you can identify?
So that's a very good question, sir. Again, so very small lesions in lung and liver don't show any uptake on PET-CT. So many times we have done especially in colorectal liver metastases, where we're looking for small liver metastases, PET-CT doesn't play any role. Many times we have seen that CCT triple phase or even contrast enhanced MRI has shown us so many liver lesions. Similarly, for small lesions less than 1 centimeter, I would say, and by technically, if it's 7 to 8 mm, PET-CT will never able to tell you whether that lesion is suspicious or not. Again, I have to go back onto the CT lung window, as Dr. Rupa showed. If the margins are speculated, if the margins are irregular, I would call that lesion suspicious and go ahead for doing a biopsy.
So he has made a very important comments that colleagues should consider. For liver metastasis, the gold standard is a 3-phase CT scan or a MRI, not a PET-CT. And especially when we are dealing with colorectal. Colorectal PET-CT is a good friend for us. for seeing the response, to look for the the recurrence, post-treatment response. But when it is a liver mets, no, PET CT is no more a friend. We need the 3-phase CT scan or a MRI to see, because as he said, we should not be very happy looking at a PET CT. There is no local recurrence and liver is fine. But if we really suspect, or if we really want to do, normally what I practice once in a year, I do for 3-phase CT scan. And if there is a suspicion, then I go for MRI to confirm it. And finally, again, it is the biopsy. So, I mean, for all the junior colleagues, that the PET CT is a very good tool. Today's discussion, now you can imagine the intention of us was, it was a made game. Me and Rupa, intentionally, Rupa didn't touch the PET CT, and I wanted Abhishek to touch, and my majority of the question was to discuss the limitation of PET CT. We should not think today in 2020, we have a magic thing called PET CT which can do everything. No, it is not. PET CT is a wonderful tool, but it is not the solution of everything. So I think now we move on to our next session, is our case discussion. Today, our colleague, Dr. Arman Reza Chaudhary, will be doing the case discussion. Then I will again join you. So now I request Arman to share his screen, and I need a volunteer for anybody who want to be with Arman. Somebody new, not Debraj, not Sonia, not Riyadh. Who will be the volunteer? And by the way, sorry?
Sarwat.
Sarwat, okay.
Are you
Just
ready?
came from hospital, Sarwat.
Are you ready?
Dr. Sarwat, I think she's the registrar, no, Sarwat?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, unit 1 register.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
So be the volunteer with Arman today, okay?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Arman, you start.
Thank you, Dr. Kamal Bhai. Is the screen is visible?
It's visible, but go to the slideshow.
Okay.
Okay.
So thank you, Dr. Kamal Bhai. I'm going to start my today's case, and Dr. Shadar Sultana will volunteer me to giving me the answer. And here in my case, there are so many evidences on imaging studies of lung cancer, and we have our one faculty from our home, that is Dr. Rupapa, and another faculty, Dr. Abhishek, from abroad, from Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute. So they will definitely give their feedback and lights on my presentation after completion my presentation. So 69 years old smoker with hypertension and ischemic heart disease, presented with cough, right-sided chest pain, and occasional respiratory distress. A chest X-ray was done by the local physician, and it was mass lesion 3 into 4 centimeter approximately in size, peripherally located at the middle lobe of the right lung with mediastinal widening. FNAC was done by the local physician, and it was suggestive of adenocarcinoma. And the patient was referred to the oncologist, and our today's oncologist is Dr. Shadar Sultana. So how will you proceed further?
হ্যালো ভাই, আমি
Yeah.
একটু মিস করেছি, লাস্ট দুটো লাইন একটু মিস করেছি, নেটওয়ার্কের প্রবলেমের জন্য শোনা যাচ্ছিল না। লাস্ট দুটো লাইন।
After the chest X-ray, it was a mass lesion 3 into 4 centimeter, peripherally located at the middle lobe of the right lung with mediastinal widening, and FNAC was done by the local physician, which was suggestive of adenocarcinoma, and referred to oncologist, and you are the oncologist. So how will you proceed further? What is your suggestion?
We should confirm the mediastinal lymph node positive or not. That is, there is mediastinal lymphadenopathy is metastatic or not. We should do the staging at first, actually. And also we should do the immunohistochemistry like EGFR and ALK, and also the other baseline investigations.
So, how will you do the staging and how will you do the immunohistochemistry?
For this staging, we should do the PET scan. We may do, as this lung cancer, we may do it. We can do it, and then ultrasonography. If PET is available, then I think there is no role of ultrasonogram or any other local investigations. And for mediastinal lymphadenopathy, we can do the CT guided FNAC from the mediastinal lymph node.
So, are you satisfied with that FNAC from the lung parenchymal lesion that is suggestive of adenocarcinoma, or would you like to do something other? FNAC was done. Hello.
Yes. CT, if there is option of core biopsy, then it will be better for further immunohistochemistry. But if there is no scope, then FNAC is enough for histopathological confirmation. But if we want to do tissue,
because to do the immunohistochemistry, you need the tissue, right? So
exactly.
To do the immunohistochemistry like EGFR, ALK, ROS1, you need the tissues, and before that, and also you know that the FNAC is not all the time important. So as because it is a peripherally located lesion, you can ask your radiologist to do a TrueCAT biopsy in this situation, right?
Exactly.
Dr. Sharat, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, yes.
So the patient was advised for CT-guided TrueCAT biopsy and imaging studies. CT-guided TrueCAT biopsies and imaging studies for staging workup, right? So
yes.
What are the investigations you advise for staging workup, especially the imaging studies? My next question is, what are the investigations you advise for staging workup? Mention the imaging studies.
We can do the CT scan of brain with contrast and also ultrasonogram of whole abdomen.
What about local staging or locoregional staging?
Locoregional staging.
What about local staging or locoregional?
According to today's presentation, I think it is contrast enhanced staging. Is it contrast enhanced dynamic CT scan?
Okay, you advise at first. You are now oncologist. You advise, and then we will discuss.
Oh, then
this is your chance. You can advise.
Okay, we can do CT chest with contrast. Hello, Bhaiya.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hear me?
For locoregional staging, we can do CT scan with contrast, CT scan chest with contrast.
Okay. And okay, CT scan and chest with contrast, and then you advise for we have already about the CT scan of brain and ultrasonogram whole abdomen, right?
Yes.
Anything else?
We can do PET scan if there is available or patient can afford it.
Okay. So there is a paper published in Annals of Thoracic Medicine, and there that is the topic was distribution pattern of metastasis of lung carcinoma in relation to histological subtypes. And here they found that the liver, adrenal gland, bones, and central nervous system. These are the most common sites of metastasis from lung malignancy. So for a staging workup, we have to search out these sites. And for that reason, contrast enhanced CT scan of the chest and upper abdomen, including the complete assessment of liver, kidney, and adrenal gland, as well as bone scan if there is some bone metastasis or clinically suspected bone metastasis, because bone scan is not routinely advised, and PET scan. And PET scan with definitely coupled with CT scan can be done. So these are the imaging modalities we can advise to these patients. Not all the modalities, but these are the options actually. So will you go for PET CT scan or contrast enhanced CT scan? Which one?
PET CT scan. If patient can afford, then we'll go for PET CT scan.
Okay, so there's a paper, the best performance of PET scan versus CT scan for mediastinal staging in patient with non-small cell lung cancer, which was published in Annals of Internal Medicine. And it was actually a meta-analysis of 39 studies, and PET CT scan was more accurate than CT for identifying the lymph node involvement that is statistically significant. And for CT scan, the median sensitivity and specificity were 61 and 79% respectively, and for FDG PET it was 85 and 90% respectively. So they concluded that PET scan with 18 FDG is more accurate than CT for mediastinal staging. Another paper, the effectiveness of PET scan in the preoperative assessment of patient with suspected non-small cell lung cancer, and it was published in Lancet. And 188 patients with potentially resectable non-small cell lung cancer were randomized to either conventional workup or PET CT scan. And the addition of PET CT scan to the conventional workup prevented the future surgery for 1 out of 5 patients. So it is very much important. So the indication of PET CT in lung cancer, here we can see that the characterization of a solitary pulmonary nodule, the staging of the patient considered for radical treatment for non-small cell lung cancer, assessment of response to chemotherapy and or radiation treatment, assessment or suspected disease recurrence, and staging of the patient with non-small cell lung cancer with limited stage disease, with limited disease on CT being considered for radical therapy. So PET CT scan is done in this patient, and radiologically it was T2N2M0, that is stage 3A. Okay, so would you prefer brain imaging in all cases of lung cancer, Dr. Sharawat?
No, actually we don't prefer in all cases, especially we search
When
for
will you prefer?
histopathology. If it is small cell or adenocarcinoma, then an advanced stage above stage 2, that is stage 3B or stage 3A, and also stage 2B. And depending on histopathological report and staging, we go for further investigations for brain metastasis. And also there is importance of history and symptoms of the patient, is irrespective of histology or irrespective of staging. If patient complains, then we all must go for the investigations, and if there is no complaint of patients, then we should search about the histopathology and staging of the patient.
Very good, excellent answer. So here we can see in the NCCN guideline that if it is in case of non-small cell lung cancer and if it is stage 1A disease, there is in case of pre-treatment evaluation, there is no options is given here regarding brain imaging. But here you can see in stage 2, stage 3A, and in case of also there is a role of brain imaging as a pre-treatment evaluation. The brain imaging is advised all stages, that it may be later stage or expo. Dr. Sharawat, What is your
হ্যালো,
It's disconnected.
সাউন্ড ক্লিয়ার শোনা যাচ্ছে না ভাইয়া। হ্যালো,
আরমান ডিসকানেক্টেড হয়ে গেছিল। ওকে আরমান,
স্যার আমি ভাইয়া কোশ্চেনটা আসলে শুনতে পাইনি নেটওয়ার্কের প্রবলেমের জন্য।
Arman, are you back? Arman was having a bad connection.
So stage 1A, most probably he is asking for stage 1A MRI brain or CT contrast enhanced CT scan of brain. Which one is your preference? My preference is contrast enhanced CT scan of brain.
So to exclude any brain metastasis, you will prefer contrast enhanced CT scan over MRI.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see what, Arman, are you there? Let me give him a call. This is a net is a big issue.
So if I would want to step in, sir, as this slide shows, again, MRI definitely scores much over CT scan.
True.
And especially there was a question about posterior fossa and even the central brain lesions. MRI is indispensable, actually, sir.
Always. Agreed, Abhishek. For any metastasis on brain, MRI should be the choice, because many times we miss a lesion in conventional contrast enhanced CT scan even. For the brain mets, it is always the MRI, and this paper is showing the same thing. Arman, are you there?
Arman, is possible for facing some problem in this line.
So, sir,
They have the slides over.
Samir, তুমি কি slide share করছো নাকি আরমান করছে?
Arman is showing the slide, sir. Do you want me to screen share?
No, but who is now? He is not connected. So how he is? We can see his screen.
Okay, he is disconnected, but it is almost connected. That's why the screen is still showing, sir.
Let me call.
So, do you want me to take off his screen, sir?
Hello?
I think Arman says
Sound
back.
শোনা যাচ্ছে এখানে?
Yeah, you are audible, sir.
Okay. So, Dr. Sharat, you advised for CT scan with contrast. So there is a paper published in Journal of Neuro-Oncology. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So the diagnostic accuracy of MRI compared to CCT in patient with brain metastasis, and the aim of this study was to investigate what additional information could be gained from the MRI over CCT. So 55 patients with solitary brain metastasis, according to contrast enhanced CT scan, were found, and 17 had multiple brain metastasis on MRI and 38 had solitary brain metastasis in both. So the main culprit was the small diameter, that is less than 2 centimeter size. So they concluded that MRI indispensable in the diagnostic workup for patients with brain metastasis for choosing the optimum therapeutic approach, especially with regard to the decision whether to operate or to primarily irradiate the patient metastasis. So here the advantage of MRI and CT scan of brain is listed here. Like the MRI brain, no ionizing radiation, multiple use is possible, more sensitive and specific for abnormalities within the brain, and can be performed in any imaging plane without having to physically move the patient. MRI contrast agents have a considerably smaller risk of development of hypersensitivity or lethal allergic reaction. MRI allows the evaluation of a structure that may be obscured by artifact from the bone in CT images. And what are, yes, CTs can have also some benefit, like faster than MRI, less costly than MRI, and less sensitive to patient motion during the examination. And CT may be easier to perform in claustrophobic or heavy patients, provide details evaluation of cortical bone, allows accurate detection of calcification and metal foreign bodies, and CT can be performed at no risk to the patients with implantable medical devices. We all know this. So MRI of the brain is done in these patients and it was normal. So what about bone scan, Dr. Sharwat? What about bone scan?
If patient has any bony pain or there was raised alkaline phosphatase, we can go for bone scan. Otherwise, routinely we don't do bone scan in lung cancer early stage cases.
Arman, Arman, are you there?
You're right, but if yeah,
Yes, please.
so if PET scan is done, no bone scan, and if because PET scan replaces the place of bone scan if available and if affordable, definitely. And bone scan, you have already mentioned that if there is symptomatic bone scan or raised alkaline phosphatase, then bone scan is indicated. And
Clear শোনা যাচ্ছে না ভাইয়া? Hello.
in case of if the PET scan and FDG PET with the same sensitivity and a better accuracy than those with technetium guided bone scan to detect bone metastasis, bony lesion in patient with biopsy-proven non-small cell lung cancer. And another paper, the efficacy comparison between the PET scan and bone scan in detecting bone metastasis in non-small cell lung cancer. Here we can see that the accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity is higher, is statistically significant in PET scan. So PET scan is superior to bone scan in detection of bone metastasis of non-small cell lung cancer with lower incidence of false positive as well as false negative results. So, Dr. Sharwat,
জি ভাইয়া বলেন। আমি ক্লিয়ার শুনতে পাচ্ছি না, আমি সাউন্ড খুব ইয়া হচ্ছে,
তোমার কথা শোনা is breaking up.
ইন্টারাকশন হচ্ছে।
So PET scan is stops for time. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
জি ভাইয়া শোনা যাচ্ছে, বলেন।
Okay. So in Bangladesh perspective, 18 FDG is sometimes not available. So PET scan is stopped in the centers where PET scan is available, right? And sometimes isotope bone scan, this is also unavailability. So bone scan is also stopped for time being. So what will you advise patients for to detect the bone metastasis?
If patient complains any localized pain, we may do the plate X-ray in both film or anterior, posterior, or lateral film, and we also can do alkaline phosphatase and serum calcium levels to see the any relations is visible or not. It's by X-ray.
Okay. So this is a paper published in Journal of Magnetic Resonance Imaging. So the detection of bone metastasis comparison of whole body diffusion emerging with or without
Hello Arman bhai, sound clear na bhaiya?
Imaging and bone. So non-small lung cancer and they underwent whole body MRI, CT and before the treatment. And
I think Arman is disconnected again.
Sharwat, can you hear me?
Now it is okay.
Yes, yes. Now clearly.
So the specificity and accuracy of whole body MRI with diffusion weighted images were significantly higher than bone scan and PET scan. So whole body MRI with diffusion weighted images can be used for bone metastasis assessment of non-small cell lung cancer patients as accurate as bone scan or PET scan.
Thank you.
So finally, the patient was stage 3A, but current chemoradiation and start that treatment. So what will be your advice regarding response evaluation at the ending day of the radiation, at the last day of the radiation? What will your advice regarding response evaluation? This is the last question, Sharat.
At the last day of, we actually, in our center, we don't do any investigation at the last day of radiation. We ask the patient to
I'm asking
come.
about advice. What is your advice?
Okay, we can advise PET CT scan for evaluation or contrast enhanced CT scan if patient can afford the PET CT scan.
So you're right, but not the immediate, after maybe after 2 months.
Exactly.
Okay. So this is the last paper published in Journal of Clinical Oncology, that is the scan is superior to scan aspirin after radiotherapy or chemoradiotherapy in patient with non-small cell lung cancer. So, Kalbhai, am I audible?
Yeah, sometimes you are breaking out, sometimes it's fine. Now it is okay.
So there was poor agreement between the PET CT and CT scan, which are identical in only 40% patients, and significantly more complete responses were seen with PET CT scan than CT scan. And 12 patients were just non-responded on PET CT scan versus 20 on CT scan. And so PET CT response was significantly associated with survival duration. So they concluded that for response evaluation, PET CT scan is the best option. So thank you. So I hope that our radiologist faculty, both from the home and abroad, they will definitely give some lights on this presentation and will clarify the confusions which may arise in these discussions.
So thank you, Arman. Even we had some technical issues, but very nicely you have covered most of the thing. But at this point, again, I want to ask Abhishek, that what is your protocol after how many months of radiotherapy or chemoradiotherapy, you do a follow-up scan, PET CT especially, and after surgery, after how many months in your center, your colleagues advise for a PET CT? What is the interval time?
So again, so it depends from treatment to treatment in terms of what treatment is being offered, but generally it's 2 to 3 months, sir, especially after surgery and radiotherapy. And now there is a lot of data that from chemotherapy point of view, even after 3 cycles, the medical oncologist would want to do an early PET CT to look for early responders and people who would fail eventually.
Hello.
There's some data that's coming.
Yes, please. So Abhishek, my question was very particular about, as you said, I thank you, Amin, for the explanation, but there is a trend of doing PET CT after surgery. So for any stage, it may be lung, it may be colon. I mean, it happens, say for example, I feel so bad, oh sorry, somebody have not done the PET CT, but surgery is done, you should do it now. So then patient don't sleep and I don't sleep because something illuminates. And you know, in PET CT, when there is illumination, there is a question. And unless you do a biopsy, you cannot prove it. So what is the practice of your center normally after surgery, or what is the recommendation? That is the minimum time after surgery should do a PET CT.
So minimum, it's definitely 2 months. You should not do it before 6 weeks at least, because then you would get a lot of post-op changes, inflammation and all those things, even after radiation. So I'll take you to next level. Let's talk about SBRT in liver. So till date, we don't have a definitive guidelines that we would have some patients who would show some activity on PET CT even after 6 months. And if you would not do anything and follow them up for the next maybe 6 months, you would then realize that that lesion has totally become non-active. It's still evolving, but definitely never ever before 6 to 8 weeks, both surgery and radiation, sir.
Thanks, Abhishek. I mean, that is a message to colleagues that You see, many of our centers are doing PET CT even after 1 week of surgery. And some of our colleagues are claiming, I don't know how, that they can differentiate between the post-op change and something which is not scientifically proven. The science is minimum 2 months, and somebody says it is up to 3 months. And as you was telling about the liver, let me share one of my very small experience of SBRD of kidney. I have done a case, and when I was doing a follow-up, it was increasing in size with normal CT scan. Then I did a PET CT, and it was the equal SUV. So I was trying to convince the authority, the patient person, that at least it is not more, so let us wait. Then after 6 months, we did it, it went down, size and SUV. So, you know, in this type of tricky situation, sometimes PET CT may raise a question rather than solving a question. So I think so what should be the imaging fast? Altaf Hussain Riyad for follow-up. For lung cancer, the recommended what was the recommendation from Arman's message, if it is chemoradiotherapy, ideally we should do a PET CT. But you can do a CT scan also, but PET CT is better because it is giving a better information. But as Dr. Sarwat is mentioning in the chat box, yes, country like us, where PET CT is 50,000 bucks, there definitely you can do a CT scan. Again, I tell that PET CT is good, but think when PET CT came, only a few years back, what we have been doing for so many years, and all the data now we are having in our hand is based on that those conventional contrast enhanced CT scan. The area where the radiologists struggle is it is the post-radiation fibrosis or a recurrence. Otherwise, to see the response, CT scan with contrast is enough. They struggle. If I challenge Abhishek or Rupa, is it a post-radiation fibrosis or a recurrence? Then they will scratch their head and they will say probably, you know, it is very difficult. In that setting, PET CT plays a good role. That was they were telling that to identify the recurrence and also the response, PET CT is a good tool. Arman, is there any contraindication of doing PET CT scan or bone scan immediately after radiotherapy? Yes, already it is discussed. After chemo, yes, but after radiotherapy, no. After radiotherapy, if you do a PET CT, you may not get the correct answer. Sometimes it is like a flare. You may get a higher SUV than pre-treatment because it is the, say for example, don't do FNAC just after radiation. You will find so many atypia, radiation-induced atypia, that may give you information that probably it is a malignancy, which is really not. So I think now, but
কোশ্চেনটা আচ্ছা পেট সিটি স্ক্যানের ব্যাপারে ঠিক আছে, বাট কোশ্চেনটা হচ্ছে যে sometimes some centers like some patient is treating with chemotherapy or radiotherapy, but in between bony pain developed and patient was advised for bone scan, and sometimes some center refused to do bone scan. My question is there any contraindication immediately after chemotherapy or radiotherapy not to do the bone scan? Is there any contraindication or not?
Abhishek, any comment on bone scan after chemo and radio, immediately after?
Sir, again, I think we'll see personally, my knowledge about bone scan is limited, but still what I have seen in my practice again, it would be problematic in terms of a reactive flare. The marrow would show some changes due to immediate chemo and radiotherapy. So again, so for the same reason, if a patient is hyperthyroid and other things, you would want to tackle those things also, because then a lot of background fallacious changes would also come into the marrow, and then you would have some problems onto that. Personally, sir, I don't do nuclear medicine much about that, so I really can't answer that. So
me also don't have a very clear idea, but Arman should not do PET, but maybe on the next week, we will try to gather some information. We will discuss it. Thanks for raising the nice question. Now it is the quiz time. So most attractive part of our session is the quiz, because a group of people are waiting to get the prize. So now may I ask Samir to put the quiz question on the chat box.
Quiz link is given, sir.
It is already given, so count the time. The quiz is given in the chat box. So during this time, if anybody who is not very active in the quiz may bring some issues like some discussion with Dr. Rupa or Abhishek, because this is a good opportunity, or both of them are quite busy in home and abroad. We don't get enough time from them to discuss. Whenever we are calling, they are quite busy, and we are so grateful that even their busy schedule, they are responding to our call. And we are especially, I'm grateful to Rupa because whenever we are discussing, she is responding, and always we are having a discussion to come to a conclusion. I think that makes a team. And any question, maybe we can have some discussion during this period. Rupa, you may have some question also, I don't know. To Abhishek.
My question to Abhishek, how small lesion you do core biopsy, lung lesion you do core biopsy?
Smallest, how much? What is the minimum?
Smallest, yeah, minimum size.
So, ma'am, I've done even for a lesion as small as 5 millimeter.
Yeah.
And so we have CT fluoroscopy with us. So that is something which we use, but again, that's too much of radiation for us also. So what I do is that if it is a pleural based lesion, I usually target them on ultrasound. And we have even done lesions as small as 2 to 3 millimeters if they're touching pleural surface. If you're going to put an ultrasound probe, you will see that lesion very well. With probably during an inspiration or an expiration, you would see that lesion. And the moment you see it, I would use an automatic firing biopsy gun to just go through and through that lesion. So we have done that for the pleural based, but definitely for central lesions, for lesions away from pleura, I think the smallest I have done is around 4-5 mm. But I've used CT fluoroscopy for that because again, without using CT fluoroscopy, it would be difficult and only increase the risk of pneumothorax for such patients.
Thank you.
So for the core biopsy, how many normally for my, I'm not in, how many piece of tissue that you get?
Yes. So that's a very, very important question, sir. You would know it's all about molecular thing, especially in medical oncology. So as a dictum, in all our lung biopsies, we're using a coaxial needle technique, where I would put a coaxial needle first, and through that needle, I would put my biopsy gun every time and take multiple cores. So this helps in multiple ways. One is we're not puncturing the pleura again and again. Risk of pneumothorax goes pretty low, and I can take any number of samples. So as a routine, we're taking at least 5 to 6 tissue cores with a 18 gauge biopsy gun. So pathologists are happy. And now routinely, we are sending all lung cancer patient biopsies for upfront molecular testing. We are sending, so we have got a code from the Department of Pathology, and that upfront testing for EGFR, ALK, and even PDL1. So that saves a lot of time for the patient because otherwise they would have to wait initially for histopathological diagnosis and then for the IHC. But the pathologists are happy with 5 to 6 cores. They're more than happy.
Thanks, Abhishek. So tissue is the issue. So some of my friends said that no meat, no treat. So
absolutely.
Don't have a meat, there is no treat. So another question in your center, I mean, as you are doing routinely, I know the biopsies or core biopsy, what is the percentage of complication, I mean, which required hospitalization?
Yes, sir. That's a very important question, sir. We are practicing in a very, very open manner, sir. In terms of whenever we see a lesion that is more central, I would always want that patient to go for bronchoscopic biopsy upfront. And lesions, those are peripheral, and patients who are at risk of bronchoscopy who can't undergo sedation. So those are the patients I would do a percutaneous outside biopsy. And we recently presented our data at one of our Indian conferences, and we have done more than 1,000 lung biopsies in the last 1 year. And we haven't had a single patient with a clinically significant pneumothorax. Our pneumothorax rate was around 15%, but all of them were minimal and trivial, and they settled without any further treatment. So not in a single patient, we had to put a chest tube. And that's primarily, as I would reiterate, that's primarily because we're using a coaxial needle technique. We're puncturing the pleura only once. So as long as we're following that, we can avoid all these complications pretty much. But yes, we have had patients who have had hemopsis. it's important to counsel the patients that whenever we do a biopsy, whenever we take a blood sample, a blood definitely oozes. In terms of lung biopsy, you might have some hemopsis. Counsel the patient, take proper consent, take all precautions, and I think you're good to go.
Thanks, Abhishek. I think that is quite encouraging, and congratulations. More than 1,000 cases, no casualty. It is something, you know, that if you are doing judiciously and you are using the technique, so it is not that risky. And because a country like us, where still it is not a very popular, so these are the data that we should see in our, not America, not England, but in our regional area, which will give us courage to go for core biopsy.
Sir, as you rightly said, patient selection is important. I can be heroic and targeting central lesions,
True.
but again, patient interest comes first, sir.
Yeah, that is very important. I think what he said, that whenever it is possible to reach by bronchoscopy, don't try to put a needle. That is the biggest message, because for us, all core biopsy, but we've now forgetting that there is something called bronchoscopy. So because initially it was FNAC, so people are always pushing for FNAC, but when it's a core biopsy, we should think of more the bronchoscopy tissue, because they can get a bigger tissue, and it is much safer than putting a needle in the mediastinal, near central lesion. Thank you, Abhishek. So now we are moving to our next portion is the rapid fire. I need a volunteer quickly, because we are already crossing our time. Our president will not be very happy. We want to start on time, finish on time. Who will be the volunteer? Quick.
Sir, I want to try.
Who is it?
I am Tasneem, Dr. Tasneem.
Okay, Tasneem, the best performer in debate. So let's see how you do here. So what is the difference of PET-CT or bone scan for bone metastasis diagnosis? Which one is better as per your statement, and why? What do you prefer? You want to do a bone scan or a PET-CT for metastasis of bone scan, bone mets?
Sir, bone scan, sir.
Bone scan, why? It is cheaper, it is more sensitive.
Sir, it is cheaper, sir.
And? Okay, so PET-CT is more sensitive in the meta-analysis of Arman, who have shown, but in general, still bone scan is recommended as the gold standard compared to PET-CT, the fluorine, because it is giving, on majority giving more false positive. So if I am not wrong, maybe Abhishek can correct me, but again, he is not a nuclear medicine guy. As far as I know, still the bone scan is the gold standard. So what is the ideal recommendation of extension to ask for a CT scan of chest for CA lung? You know, this is a CA lung patient. You want to ask for a CT scan chest. What is the area you want to advise? From where to where you want to ask for the CT scan? From where you will start and where you want to end? Upper limit and lower limit.
Sir, from neck to upper abdomen, sir.
So what is the bony landmark? Agreed with you 100%. From neck to upper abdomen, what is the bony landmark you want to say? Okay, let me help you. Normally it is said that from cricoid cartilage up to L1 vertebra, we want to cover the total larynx, and upper abdomen is we want to have the image of the liver and suprarenal, because as we heard from the presentation of Arman, that the common area is that we want to see the suprarenal and the liver and bones. So what is your preferred mode of scanning? Oh, sorry. I think it is a...
Your slides are not visible, sir.
Sorry? And my slide is not visible?
No, sir.
Slide is not shared.
Okay, sorry. So, what is your preferred imaging to exclude brain metastasis?
Sir, MRI of brain, sir.
Yes, MRI with contrast is a preferred option over CT scan, because it can pick up small lesion, which was mentioned by Arman. So in PET-CT, which component represent what type of imaging information? Because we have two components, one is PET, one was CT. What does PET represent? which type of imaging and what city represent?
Sir, PET gives the information about functional status, and the CT image gives information about the anatomical location of the tumor, sir.
Wonderful. PET is a functional imaging and CT gives us the anatomical imaging. So combined, we get the PET outcome. So we know at which exact location this functional instability is there. So what do you mean by low, intermediate, high, and very high stupid uptake value as per Abhishek? This is not stupid, but standard uptake value. What is the SUV? What is the value of low? What is intermediate? What is high? What is very high? Okay, let me help you. So if it is up to 2.5, they say it's low. When it is 2.5 to 5, it is intermediate. Something above 5, they say high. But if it is more than 10, they say it is very high. But the message that Abhishek said, these values is nothing. This is just a figure. We need to look at the anatomy. We need to look at the history. We need to look at many other things. And finally, we need to have a biopsy. No 100 value is not even a replacement of a biopsy. Where are the area where PET-CT plays a role in lung cancer? What are the situations that PET have a specific role, you think, in lung cancer management? In what situation it is helpful?
In case of, sir, metastasis,
okay,
recurrence, response to treatment.
Very good. 150 out of 100. So staging is not very promising, but it can help respond, prognosis, recurrence, and small cell lung cancer. And the one important thing that Abhishek mentioned is something emerging, is the response of immunotherapy. PET-CT can give us a very good help. Very well done, Tasneem. So next, what is the limitation of PET-CT? It is such a wonderful thing. What is the limitation?
So limitation is that, in case of liver metastasis, PET-CT is not very sensitive. And
very good.
Other limitations are that contrast-enhanced CT scan is more sensitive in case of mediastinal lymphadenopathy than PET-CT scan.
Okay. Anything about the size, Tasneem? Size of the lesion?
Yes, sir. Size of the regarding the size of the lesion, contrast-enhanced CT scan gives the more accurate information.
So small size macrometastasis cannot be taken out. Low metabolic tumors like carcinoid or very well differentiated carcinoma and misregistration, and also if the glucose serum level could be the limitation. So that was all. Thank you, Tasneem. Today we were very quick because we didn't have much question. I didn't have time and I don't have enough knowledge also. So that's why, thank you very much. So before going to the, so next week we will have a presentation on EBUS and TBN and thoracosynthesis in lung cancer management. We will have a very renowned speaker, Professor Ali Hussain, who was the immediate past director of National Institute of Disease of Chest, and he was the pioneer of doing EBUS in our country. He will be talking, and we will have faculty, Dr. Ullas Batra and Dr. John Conibeer will be there. And we don't know, maybe if Abhishek can make some time, he may join also with us. So that was the thing. Now I think we can go to the quiz winner part. So I think we have the answer, and I wish, so I can ask a quiz to all. Who is the winner? So let's see how many can answer the correct answer.
So Tasneem?
Sorry?
Altaf Hussain Riyadh.
Riyadh.
Who is it?
Yes,
So Tasneem?
No, who said first?
Sir,
Altaf Hussain
me.
Riyadh.
Yes.
Riyadh, sir.
So Riyadh has developed a habit of winning the quiz. So congratulations, Riyadh. I think it is the 5th time you got the quiz.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
So it is the 5th time. Maybe we are going to make you disqualified from. Okay, thank you, Riyadh. So I think we can come to the end. Again, I want to ask our president to wrap up. But before that, I want to extend my personal thanks to Abhishek. Abhishek, it was a wonderful time we had with you. We learned so many things from you, and especially a very simplistic way you have explained the thing. As you know, in our country, PET is used in a very limited center, but many of us ask for it. Sometimes without understanding the limitation, maybe we are wrongly using it and wrongly interpreting it. Today's discussion will be helpful that we will not be wrongly using it, not wrong time, wrong position. And most importantly, I think from today, none of us will feel bad that we don't have a PET CT or we cannot do a PET CT, because it is a good tool, but it is not a mandatory tool. What was the message from Abhishek? It is like a additional recipe, but not a mandatory menu in the food. So we can go out with the contrast enhanced CT scan. So Abhishek, my invitation to you, if you can manage next week, because it will be on EBAS, our pulmonologist will talk. If your presence could give some input there. If you can manage, be there. We would love to have you there. So sir, may I request you to conclude? And before that, sir, I forgot when I was busy with Abhishek, I should be giving thanks to Rupa, because Abhishek, my guest, Rupa is my everyday client. Every day I call her. She is my friend. She is she helps me to come, with all the patients. So Rupa, thank you very much for everyday help and today's help. It was wonderful. And to all the participants, sir.
I have a great question.
Yes, sir.
I have no CT scan, no MRI, no PET CT, only X-ray machine. What can I do?
So who is going to take the question, Rupa or Abhishek?
Sir, I have no idea regarding this. Only X-ray. I don't know, sir. I don't have any idea how we staging with the.
Let me help them. Sir, when I was a student of chest disease in 1996, we had a teacher called Professor Shamsulov. You know him, sir. He was the director of NIDCH. And he used to tell me that if you know how to read X-ray chest and you can test CBC and urine, you cover 80%. Sir, I'm sure there was an era when chest CT was a very wonderful tool. And as a pulmonologist come oncologist, I can tell you, sir, chest is a very wonderful thing. But yes, we can pick up many things, but we miss many things. So with chest CT, chest X-ray, sir, answer is we can have primary idea, but we would love to ask you to have a CT scan, sir, at least to have a better information. And maybe
I don't have machine, I don't have machine, no facility, only X-ray machine.
Sir?
I have only X-ray machine and nothing else.
But with that, yes, you can go out, because I told you, in 90s eras, people were doing with X-ray chest. And they were doing, and I know in your time, a good exam was how to interpret X-ray chest. I remember in my MBBS exam, it was a very paid question that how to interpret X-ray chest. It was very important. So we are forgetting that old friend. I think you are trying to bring that back. It is very important. We should not forget the X-ray test, especially
there are many centers in our, and there are many centers in our country where there is no PET or CT or anything else.
Yes, sir.
A limited number of centers has got all these things. When
Yes,
I was in because while I started in my oncology career,
yes,
there
sir.
was nothing extra X-ray chest machine.
True.
We used to do X-ray chest PA view, X-ray lateral view, and penetrating AP view. These three views we used to do staging and everything.
So Dr. Rupa would agree with me. As a radiologist, we still, in our examinations, chest X-ray is the biggest thing that all the radiologists are scared of, sir. And,
it is very difficult, especially the lateral view and oblique view.
Absolutely.
Maybe we share, but lateral, still I have some, I don't understand where is the heart I'm going, where is the medicine I'm going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sir, you had tough time. Definitely you people has done the great job. That's why we have easy life now, sir.
Okay, thank you all very much. We had a very nice discussion. Thank you, Abhishek and Dr. Rupa, and all the participants, Kamal and the oncology members. Today we had very little number of participants, only 28. I don't know why people could not come here today. Maybe the timing is not suiting them or not, I don't understand. However, okay, bye. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
But there was a
Bye-bye.
change of time and there
Thank you,
was a
sir.
mistake in the notification. Hopefully next week we will cover. So next Sunday, same time, we will have the IBAS invitation to all and share with your friends. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Abhishek.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Rupappa. Thank you.
So I'm ending the session.
Thank you. Thank you all.